Japan Station is made possible in part by Patreon support. And I'd like to say thank you to our newest patron, Pekka R. Thank you so much. So Pekka joined the $3 a month plus alpha tier. And if you want to join the Patreon for as little as $1 a month, you can go over to JapanKyo.com/Patreon and you can help us get closer to that $100 a month mark. We are at, I think, $85 or $86 a month. So we are pretty close, and that will be an immense help if we can get up to there. So again, JapanKyo.com/Patreon. And if you want to just do a one-time donation, you can go over to ko-fi.com/JapanKyo. Let's get to the show. Welcome to Japan Station, a production of JapanKyo.com. I'm your host, Tony Vega. So, of course, just a quick reminder, but we are producing short documentaries about Japan, and we are releasing them over on YouTube on the JapanKyo Docs, DOCS YouTube channel. You can go over to JapanKyo.com/YT. The latest video is out now, and it is about a scientist that decided to open a bar. It's a really interesting video, and Kyle did an amazing job with the edit. It just looks so wonderful. Great music and cuts, and it's just a really interesting video. So go check it out. Leave us a comment while you're there. Hit the like button and make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of the future videos that we are currently working on. Also, don't forget to use our affiliate link when you shop on Amazon. JapanKyo.com/Amazon doesn't cost you anything extra, and it supports the show. So again, JapanKyo.com/Amazon and JapanKyo.com/YT to check out the YouTube channel. So let's get to my guest. So today you're going to get to hear a conversation that I had with Anna Lughezzani. So Anna is a PhD candidate in anthropology at the University of Padova, Foscari, University of Venice, and University of Verona. So I believe that this is a joint program between these universities, and so that's why you heard me say the word university like 3 times there. So I hope I got that right, Anna. So I discovered Anna through a lecture that she gave for the University of Hawaii, and I happen to have attended grad school at the University of Hawaii, so that's why I still get their emails and I keep up to date with their different lectures and whatnot. So Anna's area of research happens to be, well, gender, but also really interesting topic, which is the job hunting process in Japan. So in Japan, this is referred to as Shūkatsu, or Shūshoku Katsudo is the proper longer version of this, but often it gets shortened to Shūkatsu. But that refers to the job hunting process in Japan, especially as it pertains to university students. So university students basically all look for jobs at the same exact time, and everybody gets hired at the same exact time. It's a very rigid and annoying and stressful system for anybody trying to get a job within these like big traditional companies. Specifically, we're going to be talking about white collar jobs. And it involves like handwriting your resume and taking a photo and dressing up and going to all these different setsumeikai, which are these orientations. And it's this whole long involved process. And so we're going to be talking about that, but also we're going to be talking about the different expectations for these female university students, women trying to enter these jobs. They have to go through somewhat of a different process in a way. And then they also have to deal with the whole other thing once they're in the workforce, which is this dual career path system. And I won't get into that too deeply because we are going to be talking about that. So anyway, let's get into it. Here is my conversation with Anna Lughezzani.
The next stop is Japan Station. The doors on the right side will open.
So, I really enjoyed the presentation, thought it was really interesting, and it really took me back to my kind of college days when I was studying abroad in Japan, because I was a third year. I would be like third year, fourth year, like in between. So many of my friends were around that age. And so, a lot of my Japanese friends were putting on suits and looking for jobs and going to all these like different, they call them setsumekais, like, literally exclamation meetings, explanation meetings, but they're like kind of orientations, I guess you would say. And they were doing this and applying, and this was right around like 2007, 2008. So after, the recession, so it was really hard to get a job. So I heard a lot about the job hunting and all this stuff, and I was watching them kind of suffer through this process. So, but this was something that I didn't know about until I was in university, in Japan. They didn't teach me this in Florida. Right. So how did you have a similar experience? What caught your attention about this whole job process for new graduates in Japan?
Well, actually, it was exactly the same for me, because it was the first time that I went abroad, to Japan to study Japanese, that I first saw some of my friends, my Japanese friends, go through Shūkatsu. And what really caught my attention, especially, was the fact that they were all wearing the same clothes. And of course, what you mentioned is very true, that it's a very stressful time in their lives, and they kind of change so much during that time, both in their appearance and in their what they have to do, right? They have to look more serious, and start really committing to, because, if you've been to Japan to study, the Japanese students, university students, are not that committed to studying. They take job hunting very, very seriously. They have to, because it's, they have so many, there's so much pressure on their shoulders from their family, their peers, their professors, and of course, companies to be successful.
Yeah, like I remember hearing stories like, I applied to like 40 places and I still haven't gotten a job. And like, you feel so bad for them because they have to like handwrite the resume and do the pictures and one after the other and all this stuff. It's such a big process. And meanwhile, I'm like the same age as them. I'm about to graduate like a year or half a year from that point. And I don't even know what the heck I'm going to do next.
Yeah, and they have to know right away, before even they graduate. They have to secure a place. And it's as you said, it's very time consuming, the process. They have to handwrite every resume, and they have to, of course, tailor their application to that specific company. And you may apply to I don't know, hundreds of companies and
sometimes,
and still might not get a job. And the interesting thing is that there's this kind of mystique of the job hunting process, because you never know actually what companies are looking for and what they are looking at when they are interviewing you. And sometimes you never know why you didn't get selected and all of your friends got a super amazing job and you didn't. So that adds a lot of stress to the process, and that's why there's so many books about job hunting and about jikobunseki, which is like self reflection. This thing that they have to do in order to be successful in job hunting is like finding more about yourself, like what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and also what kind of like sector in the job market you are most suitable for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, I mean, there were so many aspects of that job hunting process that really like stood out to me. Like, for example, there would be like group interviews, right? It would be like 3 or 4 or 5 people being interviewed at the same time. And you're like, is that really like the most effective way to do that? Like,
sometimes there's so many steps. You have to do a first interview, a second, a third, a fourth. And sometimes they are group interviews because they want to see how you interact with your peers and with your superiors. And I don't know if that's completely true, but one of my friends, whom I also interviewed for this research, told me that she started to realize that she wasn't being successful in job hunting because in all of these group interviews, she was taking the lead and kind of being the leader because she has maybe different values. I don't know. She values leadership more than maybe teamwork. And she realized that wasn't seen as desirable from companies. And so even if she performed well and she did a good job in the interview, she never got selected. So she started changing her attitude.
Yeah, that's so stressful. So the general idea is that these companies prefer the fresh graduates instead of the experienced person for these positions, right?
Yeah.
So what's the thinking there then?
Well, basically, for most companies, I think for most companies in the Japanese Federation business, the Keidan Ren, which are mostly the very old traditional companies, Japanese companies, the system, there's a system for hiring new employees, which is called Shinsotsu Ikkatsu Saiyo, which translates to the kind of bulk hiring of new graduates. So they every year there's the job hunting season, and in that season they hire as many graduates, as many students as they need, and that's it. They don't hire in any other period of the year. And the reasoning behind that is that they don't look for skill or professional experience. They look for a blank slate. And there's a saying which is kaisa no iro ni someru, which is like being colored by the company, basically. So you are a blank slate, and the company fills you with their knowledge, and they want potential. They don't want skill. They look for someone who could be the right fit for them if they were trained. So they don't look for someone who is the right fit. And there's this prejudice that someone who was trained by another company, like it was too late for them. They were already trained in a different way. Now they were old, and now they had knowledge and experience. So they probably wouldn't be as willing to do what the new company wants them to do. So it's also based on the fact that these very traditional Japanese companies are very hierarchical. So if you are a new employee, no matter what your age is, no matter your experience, you're at the bottom because you are promoted based on seniority, and not so much based on performance. And so, this hiring system fits this hierarchical structure. And that's why many of these companies look for, like, a trait that they look for in students is humility and being able to follow the rules and not to be too independent, not to be like, to be a team worker, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't really push innovation, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly humility and all that's great, but I mean, there also needs to be a balance sometimes, and so I can understand how that could be very frustrating for a lot of people that have to go through this.
And I think it's very frustrating for students as well, because in university, when you enter university in Japan, it's basically the first time that you enjoy some freedom, because you don't have to follow the strict rules of high school anymore. Like some high schools in Japan, even like you have to wear a uniform. You can't, I don't know, dye your hair blonde if you want. So you have to follow strict rules, and you're still under your parents' control in a way. But when Japanese students go to university, usually they have much more freedom of expression, of deciding what they want to wear, what they want to do. And they start gaining, knowledge. They're students. So by the end of their university years, they have learned a lot. So they have 4 years of university in which they learn many things. And, but when they enter a company, as soon as they become a shakaijin and they become an employee, they are treated as if they knew nothing because now they've entered the work sphere and they don't know nothing about work in that specific company. So now they're treated as if they don't know nothing, and they have to go back to a position of, humility.
Yeah. Like I remember it's very, very common, probably even today. I haven't been to Japan in the past couple of years for obvious reasons, but probably still it's very common for especially Japanese women to dye their hair brown, right? So, they graduate from high school, they start dyeing their hair again, but then when it comes time to look for a job and they have to take the picture for the resume, now they have to dye their hair black again.
Yeah.
It's just such a, like, how can I put it? It's like everybody knows that that's the thing you're supposed to do, even though nobody really wants to do it. And so they all have to act the same way so that they get the thing that they need.
Exactly. And, brown hair is not such a crazy color, right?
It's not. It's totally not. I mean, a lot of people have, there are some Japanese people that naturally have brownish hair. So
exactly. And sometimes even if their natural hair is, dark brown, they still dye their hair black because they don't want to be judged at interviews.
Yeah. So, okay, you brought up something, and I mean, a lot of these things are connected, but was it the motherhood protection rhetoric, and then I guess that ties into also the dual career track that comes up. Could you explain like what that is, how that all connects?
Yeah, basically, this bosei hogo, so motherhood protection rhetoric, was first born in the 1930s in the feminist discourse. And it was for positive reasons, because at that time, work conditions for women were much worse than for men. Women worked more hours for less money and in worse conditions. And there was, even at the time, there was an understanding of this. There was a study done by doctors, like in the medical field, on tuberculosis. And they found out that women were much more prone to tuberculosis, and much more women were dying because of tuberculosis because they worked in much worse conditions. So this kind of kind of framing of the situation was first introduced by feminists because they wanted to protect working women. So basically, in the 30s, it was just before the war, when Japan was preparing for the war. And basically, feminists understood that they had to basically appeal to these policymakers in a way that they could understand it. So they used the fact that women are mothers. So if Japan wanted to be a strong nation and have a strong army, they had to protect women because women would have children, which would then become soldiers. So it was instrumental, basically, to their cause. But it turned out to be a double-edged sword because policymakers first agreed with this pleas by the feminists, but they didn't better work conditions for women. They just prevented them from working very dangerous jobs, like, for example, working underground in mines. And I mean, this was, to protect women, but at the same time, it made it more difficult for women to work. And so they had to turn to smaller mines, which were unregulated and in which they could work, but for even worse conditions.
Right.
But then when the war started and the Japanese men went to war, basically what the government decided was, okay, now we don't have as many men, so let's make it possible for women to work in mines again. And so they could go back to work. And then again, when the men returned from the war, no, you cannot work for these mines anymore. So you see, it was used, and it was always framed with this motherhood protection rhetoric. So it was always because women are mothers and we have to protect their health. We have to protect their children's health. But it was used in opposite ways according to the need of the policymakers, basically. And also, interestingly, the same rhetoric emerged in the 80s when the Equal Employment Opportunity Law was being planned, was being written. And the Equal Employment Opportunity Law is the one that created the dual employment system, the dual career track system in Japan. So basically, what this law says, is that you cannot discriminate explicitly between men and women for a job. So what Japanese companies would do before that was they would explicitly say that for a certain position, they needed a man or a woman. And the law eliminates this kind of direct discrimination. But at the same time, it allowed for indirect discrimination because companies created this dual career track system. So they created two tracks in their company. One was Sogoshoku, so the managerial track, that leads you to become a manager in the company. So it allows for professional advancement. And the other one was Ippanshoku, so the clerical track, which does not allow for career advancement. And so that they did not need to specify that one was for women and one was for men, because the conditions and the pay and everything related to the two tracks meant that one was more desirable for women and one was more desirable for men. Right. And even now the situation is that the 99.9% of employees in the clerical track are women. And now there's many more women in the managerial track, but they're still a minority.
Mm-hmm. I believe one of the things that is often associated with the managerial track is what in Japanese it's called like what's it called tanshin funin, right? So like when the company will send. Usually it's the man, right? It's a guy that they send off to a different part of the country, sometimes even a different country. They send them off to work there for no apparent reason, in my opinion, from what I've seen in many cases. They just send them to a different location to work there. And even if the person is married, they just send them off. And oftentimes the wife and the child, if there's a child, they will stay behind where the man will go off to work, right? For, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 years sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the biggest things that make the managerial track impossible for many women. And yeah, it is for mysterious reasons, I think, that they send most of their employees. Basically, it's also sort of a test. Like they test you if you are willing to, do that sacrifice, for the company, because it's usually no longer than, it's usually a short period of time, 1 year, 2 years, and then you can go back to where you used to work. And, thinking it's dreaded by anyone, because no one wants to be forced to move to a different region, a different country, as you said. But is it especially dreaded by women? Because in Japan, they are still expected to be the main caregivers for their children. So if they want to have a family, thinking like being moved to a different branch would be impossible for them. And the men don't like that either. But they know that if they want to have a career, they have to say yes, because it's not like the company asks you, do you want to spend a year in this branch in the middle of nowhere? And it's not like you can't say no. You can't say no, but that if you do, then your career would be compromised. Yeah. So that's also one of the reasons why this dual career track reinforces the sexual division of labor, both in the company, in the workplace, and at home. Because if the father has to leave for 2 years, of course, how can the mother be working and taking care of the children?
Yeah. Or like the mother goes to try to be a manager somewhere else, but then they want to send her somewhere else. So it's like the father somewhere else, the mother somewhere else. It's like, how do you do that?
Exactly. If you work in the managerial track and you have children, you have to have a partner, or at least
that doesn't work in the managerial.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I guess also like longer hours and things like that are expected more in the managerial position. There's more flexibility in the general, like with a clerical track, right?
Yeah, you have to work far more hours. Like there's not a set amount of hours that you work, right? I mean, I guess they're probably on the contract. Says that you work from 9 to 5, but then even in contracts, they expect you to work a certain amount of overtime hours, and sometimes it's a high number of hours. And but this stereotype of the Japanese white collar worker who works until very late in the evening and then goes out to drink with his colleagues it's a stereotype, but it's not that far from the truth. Companies do still expect you to work long hours, and sometimes they don't even pay for overtime work. And then your superiors still expect you to take part in these nighttime activities with them, because that creates a space for a more informal bonding between colleagues. And it's usually where some of the, decisions about promotions are taken. And if you have children, how can you stay out until midnight or 1, 2 in the morning drinking with your colleagues? And these are also occasions that, it's usually a majority of men. And if you are a minority of women in that situation, with a lot of men drinking and being drunk, it's not usually ideal, even if you don't have children.
It's uncomfortable. Yeah. Huh. So you also talk about some of the kind of, this is kind of going back towards the hiring and the Shūkatsu kind of side of things a little bit more, but you talk about some of the rules and expectations and information that is given to women that oftentimes men don't get, or they don't have to do. There's kind of just a whole different way of doing things for women through the hiring process as well, right?
Yes. There's more rules that they have to abide to, but there also are, as you said, more information that they are given. Basically, what I've noticed is that there are basically 2 different job hunting processes for men and for women, because there's many websites, even magazines, and job fairs that are for female students only, basically. And also companies give out pamphlets, flyers to students. And sometimes they have a flyers that is only for women, and they don't give it to the male students. And usually in these job fairs and setsumekai for female students, what they add to their normal, routine presentation, it's only the information regarding parental leave and, all of the accommodations, all of the benefits that you can have at that company if you have children. And it's not that they don't give the same opportunities, the same benefits to men, is that they take for granted that male students are not interested in that.
Yeah.
I've seen in many occasions the HR person presenting the company and addressing a mixed audience, turning to the topic of parental leave and opening by saying, oh, this probably is interesting for the women in the audience, so please forgive us if we take the time to talk about this. And it's what?
It's guys, take a break. You can go to the bathroom right now.
Yeah, exactly. And in some occasions, not just one occasion, I think 2 or 3 times, they added to show how the company was so accommodating. They even added, there was even one of our male colleagues who took parental leave. And they usually said that as if it was a joke, they were laughing. It's oh yeah, and even one guy took parental leave. And, it's why is that funny? And sometimes in these pamphlets or in these presentations, they give you some data about, how many women took parental leave and how many men. And they sometimes give this small percentage of male employees who took parental leave, but they don't say for how long. And that's the key, because you can take parental leave for 1 day and be at work the next day, right?
Yeah.
So, they don't mention for how long. So it's usually very tricky to understand. But the thing is that as a company, you have to give men the opportunity to take parental leave. when they have a child. But they do everything in their power to not let male employees know that they can. And if they know that they can, they make everything they can. They do everything they can to let you know that that's weird, that you shouldn't, and that will compromise your career.
Right. Yeah,
oh, and also about you mentioned the rules that women have to follow.
Yeah.
Different rules. I mean, I found it funny and also kind of, very interesting that they have these classes, like when you go to job fairs or even in the career center of the university that you're attending, they offer you these classes about how to be a successful job hunter. And basically they explain from A to Z the rules that you have to follow to be a successful job hunter. And there's a lot to do with your appearance. So you have to wear a black suit. Of course, you cannot wear any other color. And you have to have dyed your hair back to black. And, but there are so many more rules for women than for men. Because usually in these classes, and this happened to be at Waseda University, where I was doing my research, like they have the first hour in which the audience is mixed. There's both male and female students, and they talk about, dress code and things like that. And then they dismiss the male students, and then they have like makeup artists come in the room, and they are like, okay, now let's talk about makeup. And they have another more hour about, talking about makeup. Because for female students, makeup is key, apparently.
Yeah.
There's always this mysterious part to job hunting that you never really know if recruiters, take note of the fact that you're wearing mascara. You don't know that explicitly, but still they teach you how to wear makeup in the appropriate way. And the interesting thing is that there are precise boundaries. So you have to wear makeup, but not too much makeup, because you don't want to be beautiful. You want to be as the recruiters want you to be. So it's kind of, hard to understand if you're not really used to makeup. But also another interesting thing was that most of my friends, most of my interviewees didn't need these classes because they knew the rules already. Because you learn these kind of things by, just watching women around you, your mother, your sisters, your friends, and you kind of learn these things by watching, right? But there are women who I met at these classes who didn't know because maybe they didn't wear makeup before that, and so they had no idea what were the right kind of foundation, right kind of mascara, and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, and like, it's the right amount of makeup. You have to have makeup, but not too much. And it has to be a specific way. And you have to wear you also should be wearing like the suit with the skirt, not with the pants, right?
Yeah.
Because the pants looks too like aggressive or something. I don't know.
Exactly. They look aggressive. No, because, they tell you, at least in these classes, they tell you that you have to do job hunting in a feminine way. You have to show your feminine side. So wearing a skirt, it basically shows you that you are willing to follow the rules. So the rule is here that in a company, when you work, you have to do it in a feminine way, let's say. And so wearing a pantsuit means that you are doing what you want and not what the recruiters want you to do. And so, I've had one of my friends tell me that she wanted to buy a pantsuit, but then her mom, who works or used to work at a career center in a university, told her, advised her not to buy the pantsuit because she looked too aggressive, too namaiki.
Kind of arrogant, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And so that might, compromise her job interviews.
Yeah. And, I mean, especially when I was in university, again, 2002, 2007, 2008. I guess they were looking for jobs around 2008. So again, right after the recession, particularly bad time. Right now, it's also a particularly bad time. So you can totally understand that if these female students, these women want to work at a, job at this, big company that's kind of stable, even if they don't want to do those things, they know they have to in order to get that job that's going to pay them a decent salary and at least, have a stable job, right? Like they just have to go through with it. They have no choice. So.
Exactly. Yeah. But, still in my research, I had, doing my field work, I had the chance to meet some women who, knew these rules and knew that they had to abide by the rules, but who still managed to find a way to circumvent these obstacles and still land the job that they wanted to get, or at least do job hunting in the way that they wanted to. Like, for example, one of my friends, I met her at one of these classes about, Shūkatsu, job hunting makeup. And she really, she was a really brave woman. Because she never wore makeup before she started doing job hunting. And she told me, and I really admire her for this, that she would wear makeup for job hunting, and she knew that she had to. And she knew that she had to learn how to, because she had no idea of all of those subtle rules that, her peers had spent their whole lifetime learning. And she didn't. But that she saw it as a tool for her to start her career. And that she didn't think that would change her in any way, that she will still be herself and that she would not start wearing makeup every day and for every occasion. She saw it as just a tool to find a job and have a career. And she thought that would not define her. Yeah.
I mean, when you can think about things that way, I think it definitely does make it more tolerable. But I mean, unfortunately, not everybody can kind of build that division, and so for some people, I'm sure it's very stressful, right? So, So I know like PhD research can take years. I have PhD friends, and I know they're you go at it for years and years and years sometimes. But I guess from the sounds of it, it seems like you were going to different sets of meikai. You were interviewing also people that were going through the job hunting process and looking at all sorts of resources. Was it just like a combination of things that you were doing?
Yeah, basically, I tend to be very anxious when I'm doing field work. So I tried everything. I was doing a lot of participant observation at these job fairs and Setsumekai.
Did you ask for like permission? Did you just go? Like, how did that work?
Well, it was, there were many things that I couldn't do because it would have been too complicated. So, I tried asking my friends if they would allow me to be there with them when they were being interviewed for a job. But I mean, that was too much to ask. I realize that now. It's too much.
It's like, I'm trying to get the job and then this foreign lady comes in.
Exactly. And I'm taking notes.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, that would have been crazy. So I tried to, test the waters and see what I could do, because also there were a lot of Setsumekai that were, closed, that you had to have applied to that company to be there. So at some point, well, at the beginning of my research, I had to decide, okay, am I going to pretend to be a job hunting student, and go through this process myself, like handwrite my resumes in Japanese and apply to these companies? Or am I going to just go to as many open things, as many open events that I can? And, I didn't feel like it was fair for me to pretend that I was job hunting. So I just went to as many open setsumekai, open job fairs as I could. And I interviewed many, many people about, it was, what's more interesting for me is how they feel about job hunting, how they see it, how they go through it. So in the end, it was still very, very interesting to do this from the outside. So I did many hours of interviews with a lot of my friends, female students and also male students. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to interview a lot of male students because I understood that there was the counterpart, the other side of the issue, and that it would have been very interesting to hear their side of the story. But unfortunately, I understood that at the end of my fieldwork, so not as many as I wanted. Right.
So just, one last question here, but, you've been looking at kind of the larger history of this, and also you've been researching this for a few years now. Have you noticed like any kind of changes, positive changes? Is this like, something kind of more isolated to some of the old traditional companies and we're seeing changes elsewhere? Like, what's the general trend that you're seeing now?
Well, everything that I said about, dual tracks, dual career tracks, and these expectations about your appearance in the company. This is all about traditional Japanese companies, because usually international companies or even, younger Japanese companies are completely different. Startups. I had one of my friends applying only to startups and international companies, and she had a completely different experience doing job hunting. She didn't even buy a black suit because they don't have the same expectations. They don't require you to follow all of these rules. So I think that, the situation is not the same in every company. The thing is that, old traditional Japanese companies are very powerful.
Yeah.
So if you can't, not everybody can be as brave as my friend and rule out all of these big names, because, you can be very successful and have a very successful careers in these companies and have a very high salary. So it's a balance of the two, and you have to decide whether you are going to compromise and follow the rules or, just go with younger, companies and have a completely different experience.
Yeah. And I'm sure, parents will go like, no, that's a new company. That's not a good job, blah, blah, blah. And then they kind of, pressure them to go to like the old traditional, like famous company or whatever. So yeah. It's a lot of societal pressure from all sides, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, no, this was fascinating. Thank you so much. I like I said, this was something that I kind of noticed firsthand. So it was nice to, kind of talk to somebody about this and go a little bit deeper than talk to somebody that's been to these setsumekai and see like what people say in these places that most of us foreigners don't go. So that was pretty, thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me.
If you want to learn even more, then you definitely should check out the video of Anna's lecture. That is the video that I mentioned in the intro that led me to discover her work. So go take a look in the show notes. There's a link there and you can watch the whole thing. If you have any questions or comments, send them over to mail@japanstationpodcast.com. Don't forget to follow, rate, and review. All that stuff is free, and it helps the show out immensely. So if you like what I'm doing here, if you've enjoyed the 80-something episodes of this show that I've produced, then the least you can do is give it a follow or a subscription or whatever it is that you do on your Apple Podcasts and Spotify's and whatever it is you're using, and leave a review if you can. All that would be greatly appreciated. You can also follow on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at JapanKyo News. Thank you so much to Unomi for providing the opening and closing song. Information, of course, in the show notes. And next episode should be out on March 1st. So that does it for this episode. Don't forget to check out the latest episode of Ichimon Japan, where we talk about katakana words that we hate. It's not really like, yeah, we basically end up laughing and making jokes, and it's a pretty fun episode. So if you enjoy learning about the Japanese language and wondering about certain little quirks of it, then you should definitely check out the latest episode of Ichimon Japan. There will be a link in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, go find your miniature pony.
Just do it!